altitude.
Here we go.
You can even calibrate your brewer for perfect water temp accuracy.
That's the sound to let you know that we are ready to start our next discussion. Here at the Smart Home Pavilion at the International Housewares Association show. This is going to be fun. This is going to be looking into the future. So put your sci-fi hats on because it's going to be a lot. It's like looking into the crystal ball. Everybody wants to know what's coming down the pike. These guys are going to tell us. This is going to be a fun discussion. We're connected. Now what? There we go. Where are we at here? We have Lou Lenzi. He is a professor at Indiana University. And we have Paul Hatch with Teams Design. First off, let's just do a brief introduction. So what do you do at Indiana University?
So I'm in the School of Informatics. I teach in the Department of Human-Computer Science. And we're really focused on user experience, the whole design thinking area around the smart home or an IoT.
Awesome. And?
Yes, so I'm Paul Hatch. I'm at Teams Design. We're a global industrial design company. And we work with a lot of global companies, working with them in IoT and digital transformation and areas like that.
All right, let's just kick this off. I have Alexa in my home. I've got my Wemo switches. I've got all kinds of stuff. So now what?
Right.
Now that I've got, where do I go? What's happening?
Well, you know, the thought is today we have a series of single endpoint solutions. You're right. We have a smart door lock. We have a smart thermostat. I think the next step is going to be how do we then begin to create a more integrated solution so that these devices are communicating with one another, which will lead you into a world of machine-to-machine communications, potentially artificial intelligence, maybe systems and technologies outside of the home that are linking into the home. So we're going to go from, geez, isn't it easy to control that door lock from an app to a more integrated solution that's really going to be personalized and customized based on my life and my experience.
Is his mic coming through? I couldn't. Are you on? I just want to make sure. Are you there? Yeah. Want to do a test real quick?
Now can you hear me?
There we go. Hey.
I got that one brilliant thought and it's gone.
Let's do that just real quick. Let's just do that. So we'll rewind real quick because I want to make sure everybody heard that. So now you said a lot of endpoint solutions, but now we're migrating to what?
That's right. So the idea is today our home automation is really a bunch of single endpoint solutions. We open an app, we control a door lock. We open an app, we control a thermostat. We open an app, we control lights. Well, at some point, you're going to want to be able to centralize and configure all those different endpoints into a single experience. And then what happens from there? Now that I have this single experience, what does that mean? Well, it means that I can control a scene in the home. I can walk in and the lights go on, the thermostat is set, et cetera. That's next. And then where do we go from there? The 3 to 5 year out period could eventually be things like health and wellness and energy management, larger system solutions.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is the industry has woken up to IoT. At first it was a big buzzword and connected products, and we'll look into it briefly. So there's enough companies now who have accepted it and have tried something out. And there's a number of stages you have to go through. First of all, sort of dabbling in IoT, getting to understand things. And in doing so, they're getting a database together. They're getting information, and they're understanding the new way of working. The next stage is then understanding what to do with that additional information, and then moving on to the next generation of products where they're getting the sort of data that they need that's going to be more beneficial to the users. So there's companies going through that transition, and then there's also smarter companies who are noticing that transition and skipping ahead a little bit, jumping into IoT or connected products by understanding, okay, if I'm going to do this, I don't just put a bunch of sensors on there and track just random things, but what is it that I really want to know in the future that's going to be most valuable to me? That's what I need to find out. And what is most valuable, because we can't predict the future, is what is the human doing with my product? What is it that they really want with my product or service? So if we can track that, then you can actually plan for the future.
All right, so let's talk about this. What is the role of AI? What is AI going to look like in the home, right? You hear a lot of people, I get pitched all the time, people are like, oh, we use machine learning, and I just roll my eyes because I'm just like, oh, you sure you do? Okay, got it. But as we generate more data, and as we are generating disparate amounts of data, but tying those all together with some kind of, I don't know, is it going to be a centralized AI, or is it going to be a few of them in the house? What is going to be the role of AI when it becomes more mainstream?
Let me give you an example of where we are today. So I have a series of major appliances in my kitchen: my refrigerator, dishwasher, my wall oven, my cooktop. And each one of those are connected to a network back to the manufacturer. And that manufacturer is tracking the health and the status of those major appliances to the point where we could envision through AI and machine learning and predictive analytics to say, guess what, Chris, you don't know this, but the compressor in your refrigerator may need to be repaired. So rather than wait for the repairman to show up and diagnose the problem, they show up at your door and say, here's the part, let's go replace that part, because we know that incident's going to happen. So that's where AI and machine learning is going to really play a role. And you may not even know that's going on behind the scenes, that, hey, I have a maintenance problem or an out of mode problem that I need to address. So that could be a single endpoint or a single platform going back to that manufacturer, or it could be tied to a larger whole home system where it's not just your major appliances in the kitchen, it could be the HVAC system, could be the electrical system in your home, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's hit a lot of, it's becoming a buzzword, AI, and a lot of people think of artificial intelligence being robots and mimicking humans. And while in terms of technology, it kind of is mimicking the way that humans learn, I think in the public sphere, AI just won't really be cognizant. People aren't really going to say, oh, my vacuum cleaner has AI. It's going to be, it's a computer. It's basically a different way of computing. And so anything that's got a chip or a smart computer in it would have AI in it, as far as people are concerned, consumers. Whereas AI at the back end is very, very relevant and important, and huge breakthroughs that are possible. And by back end, I mean at the corporate level, at the business, dealing with the electronics or the products, because AI helps them deal with big data, right? We hear about big data. So with all these connected devices we're seeing here at the show, we're getting masses and masses of data. And the next step is, what do I do with that data? How do I slice it? How do I understand it? How do I get something useful from all those tiny bits of data? And because it's so big, AI is the only way really to get some useful insights out of that data.
So you could envision there could be a service provider at the back end that's managing your home and making sure your home is operating efficiently, making sure all the appliances are working properly. It could be to the electrical grid, or do you tying back to the grid and balancing the grid? So there could be this back-end service that's managing your home independently of your lifestyle. You're just living your life.
But isn't a big barrier to that kind of just the companies themselves, right, who don't want their AI talking to that guy's AI because I don't want to share my data with you, right? So is that a big stumbling block to kind of where you envision us going? Is because inside we'll have all these digital walls that separate?
Yes, and I think you're on a very important point, which is, you think about some of the players in the space today that want to act as that gateway, right? They want to kind of crowd everybody out and say, well, these endpoints talk to me, and those endpoints, so I don't care because they're not supporting me. And I think that's one of the impediments to mass deployment of the smart home that we envision, is that people are going to try to fight for that gateway. And it's not too hard to think about what are we doing today with home entertainment. You have satellite operators, pay TV, cable operators providing video services. Now you have over-the-top services. Same kind of struggle going on in the entertainment space we're going to have in the smart home space. Who's going to be that gateway, and who's going to manage all those endpoints and then drive those services? I contend it's going to be the person that delivers meaningful services to the consumer, not necessarily just, I can control these endpoints.
I think it is a really, really interesting point, though, because to get the big benefits from the connected systems rather than connected products, you've got to collaborate. So there's got to be companies collaborating together. There's not going to be universal language, and we're not going to go open source with everything. But the collaboration will be forced. There'll be companies working together, and there are already major corporations that typically compete in other areas are collaborating now so that they can have a language that is shared. They are up and down the delivery chain in their industry, and they're working with different partners they otherwise would have competed over the same work with. So I've seen some of that with our clients as well, forcibly working together with other companies. And I'd say anyone who's starting up in connected or IoT is that they've really got to have that as focus. It's not business as we knew it before. I have my fiefdom, I have my technology, and now I just need to sell it. It is about collaborating and partnering up.
So I want to move from AI and into UX. So we'll just throw out a couple of different letters. Because you have different, right now, everybody's talking about voice, right? Like Alexa is voice, but voice is good for some things, but it's not good for everything, right? Like you can't, it's harder to follow a recipe if someone's telling me the instructions as opposed to watching it. How do you think, what do you see the role or the evolution of interfaces in terms of the smart home and where it's going? Especially someone who teaches human-computer interaction, right? Like,
so, you know, in that regard, today we're at the very early stages of this evolution. Yes, we're able to tell our smart speaker to do something, but guess what? To program it to do that thing, you're back on a keyboard, you're back on an app, you're actually setting up the voice control through a touchscreen or a graphical user interface, which is kind of interesting. I think going forward, natural language and natural language processing will eliminate that step, but we're not there yet. And that, you know, that trade-off between that process to go from graphical user interface to voice, and then voice to natural language is going to be the hard step.
But I was even wondering, just like in the kitchen, right, which is a very specific use case. And you know, you have voice for something. I can use a voice to set a timer. Great. I stick my hand in the oven. I can say a word, turn on a timer, right? But as my hands get filthier, I can't follow along with verbal instructions, and I don't want to gum up a screen. So it seems like there's, you know, motion controls, like a Kinect almost in the house. And Paul, I mean, how do you see sort of different modes interacting with one another in the kitchen specifically, but you know?
Generally in the home. I think it's a very, very good point though, generally under UX or user experience as well, whether you're using gesture, which we will see a lot more of, because voice doesn't cover everything and you can't necessarily touch buttons or controls. There's going to be a bigger range of interfaces, no question. But I think a lot of that will also go away because of the intuitiveness of certain products. That you don't necessarily need to tell it to do something. Based upon the context and your actions, it's predicting what you're doing. Again, enter AI a little bit. And therefore, all you're doing is you're having to stop it if you really don't want it, what it's offering. So it would be offering to heat up the oven if it sees you're mixing up a certain recipe.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, that's where the machine learning comes into play, right? Because it may not be a voice user interface or graphical user interface. It just may say that, hey, Chris is home, it's 8 o'clock in the evening, this is what I need, this is what Chris wants me to do based on your predictive behavior. So there's a third interface or fourth interface, depending on how you count.
Yeah, well, assuming that those devices will actually talk to one another, right? Like they'll be able to, you know, or if I'm locked into one brand, because I want that capability.
Yes.
So,
which gets back to the whole standards world, right?
Yes,
I mean,
yeah,
you know, we live and die by standards. So when there's these fiefdoms, it doesn't work. And we all talk about, you know, growing this base of, you know, 100 million households or whatever it is. Well, you know, it means breaking down those walls and playing together nicely, which is not something we always do well.
Does anybody have any questions from the audience? And if you can just raise your hand if you do, and we'll get to you.
Maybe I've got a question as well on that point. Do you think we'll reach that point where there is a standard communication language between products?
Not yet, and I think we're going to need somebody to kind of moderate that discussion, because if you look at, you know, the data that Parks has is, I mean, we talk about smart home. Today, the majority of smart home is those single endpoint solutions.
Yeah.
We haven't cracked the code to that whole home network solution. The data I saw says, you know, less than 5 million homes are really whole home enabled in the United States. If we as an industry want to grow that beyond those 5 million homes, I think we're going to need that kind of standardization, you know, whatever you call it, you know, IEEE standard, whatever, but I think we're going to need something like that to grow the pie.
What is one thing you think people are just dead wrong about in terms of where the smart home is going? Paul, I'll start with you.
Yeah.
Like, is there anything you're just like, no.
Well, yes, there's a number of things come to mind. The integration of 3D printing, let's say, into the home, I think that's certainly overrated.
Okay.
That's not necessarily part of the smart home, but certainly part of that vision that people are putting forward. There's certainly a space for 3D printing in certain areas. And
well, I think it does go into the compressor problem, right? Like, oh, your compressor is broken. We sent a message to the printer, and it printed you up a new one.
Exactly.
And here's a video on how to install it.
For a supplier, but not necessarily sitting there on the kitchen table or in the living room as a 2D printer would, which has become integrated into the home. So there is a place, and there are functions for it, but I think that's something that was certainly way overcooked in terms of its thinking. I think the other areas that also, to be honest, I would combat the thought, or I don't think we're going to reach that universal language. We've gone through phases where there's a number of companies who wanted to become the hub of the home, right? We went from individual products to, I will be the hub, and I'll control the hub from the kitchen or from the garage or from from the bedroom, and that they will be the center point for all those objects. And the users rejected that completely. They don't want to buy in somebody's hub because they don't talk well with other people's products. And that's our old thinking. So I also don't think we'll have a universal language, but there will be some common entry points. So we're going to build some walls with a few common gates that certain companies or certain languages can work together with. So within 3 years, I wouldn't say that everyone's going to be sitting in a smart home. That would also be something I'd dismiss.
Before we get to I want to touch on that real quick. I'm trying to figure out the best way to put this. Does a free market system hamper the adoption of the AI as opposed to other geographies which may implement that just on a more statewide level?
That's an interesting thought, because you think about, well, let's go back to digital music and the Apple value chain. That was a closed system, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you had to march every step of the way along with Apple, whether it be the iTunes service or the player. But that turned that market around from a bunch of disparate, MP3 players and different rip and burn software, and that really grew the market. So you could make a case that having that kind of closed system is what you need to get to the mass market, right? So, I mean, there's a case in point where you might say it's got to be a mandated kind of thing.
Well, I mean, which I know is anathema to anybody who's listening,
that's right?
But if it becomes then, if the engine that spurs innovation becomes the thing that's holding you back, it just becomes interesting.
There's going to be a bit of back and forth. I think what's going to hit us, one of the predictions within the 5-year zone, is there's going to be a huge security impact that's going to happen. It's already nibbling away already. Hackers getting into thermostats and into door locks and so on in small amounts. But there's going to be some sort of big thing that hits the news, and then security becomes part of that discussion. And there are certain ways to do that. So I think that's one of the ones that's going to evolve the discussion around home appliances, because no one wants something that's seen as less secure somehow inside their home. Because at the moment it is kind of the Wild West. We are transmitting personal data from our Fitbits, from various devices around the house, information about our personal habits that are stored somewhere, and this data belongs to someone else. So those questions are in the legal battle zones at the moment, but it's not part of public consciousness.
I would make the case that we've gone past that. I mean, Echo units, about 20 million installed.
Yeah.
Right? So those are microphones all over our house.
Sure are.
No problem. I mean, who would have thought I'm going to put a microphone in my bedroom, in my kitchen? But we're doing it. So I think we bought into that. I mean, I think we're way past the security. Geez, what are they doing with that data?
And we carry one around with us all the time.
Yeah.
So I want to leave on a positive note here in our last couple of minutes. I'm really excited to ask you this, because you're in the lab, right? You're dealing. What's kind of blowing your mind right now in terms of, and you can frame it within the smart home, but like a human-computer interaction.
I'll frame it exactly in the smart home, and that's health and wellness.
Okay.
I'm convinced that when you look at the state of our healthcare system today, and all the chronic diseases that our based on our behavior, I really believe that the smart home and connectivity can drive better healthcare outcomes. I mean, we got to face into that as a nation, and I think that's where we're going to. That's where I think this thing is going to go, because it's going to benefit the economy and our society.
Paul?
Yeah, what's blowing my mind right now is the advancements in AI. I know it sounds like a cliche, but seeing some of with the companies that we work, what they're able to tap into with AI. On one side, it is completely scary as well, because AI is going to be much better than us at calculating things, but there's also going to be some incredible breakthroughs that come through, particularly in healthcare, but also in our daily lives. But generally, we won't really notice it. It'll go on in the background.
It'll just be invisible, always around us.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, that's a great thing to think about as we wrap this up. Big round of applause, please, for Lou and Paul. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And you can catch Lou. He is speaking at the Innovation Theater at 2:30.
That's correct.
He's going to be speaking on smart home mass market adoption. Are we there yet?
Are we there
I
yet?
think we know the answer to that question. A little sneak peek. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Chris.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.